The Jason Rigdon Show is recorded in Seattle, Washington in front of a live studio audience of indifferent but cute cats. You can support this podcast by giving us a rating and review on iTunes, sharing this episode on social media, or just by telling a friend about the show. You can also support the show financially on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/Jason Rigdon.
Jason, I could speak to you all day long. I've seen a few of your podcasts. I love what you're doing.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's a great project, really. You're speaking to all kinds of different people. You were speaking to a governor or somebody running for governor, and he gave an interesting perspective, a very liberal perspective. He vouched for capitalism a lot of the time, but I think you've got a tremendous interviewing skills.
Oh, thank you.
I really admire it, and hopefully I'll pick up a few more lessons from listening to it, because you are giving people a chance to really give their opinions, and you say generic, but that's clear. That's like the very opposite, because you know, you're giving the other side, so to speak, a chance to speak, and we learn a lot from that, even though people don't agree for us. It's important to speak to everybody, and that's something we hope to do, but we haven't had as many opportunities you have. So, you know, I just want to say great stuff, and I am a fan.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. Yeah, it's I was doing I still do kind of a very local show, and now I'm trying to do things that's not so local. I think I got kind of I don't want to say I got burnt out from local politics, but so just trying to expand. Let's see. So everything's working. It looks like pretty good. So usually what I have people do is just interview themselves. Sorry, it is morning. I am drinking my coffee. I am not fully operational yet. Usually have people just kind of introduce themselves. So if you just want to go one at a time, whenever you're ready, and just kind of say your name and maybe like a really brief introduction to your show.
Sure, go for it.
Known as Shibby. As I said, I'm from Liverpool, England. I'd say pretty much most of who I am is tied very much to revolutionary politics. I do try to, I think I just am, as a person, a Marxist-Leninist, or like a dialectical historian, or a Marxist, flipping materialist dialectician. There's so many different ways where, to describe this ideology, and so many people have got so many different opinions of this ideology, but, honestly, I wouldn't know where to start with myself. But I'll go into Revolutionary Lumpen Radio. Revolutionary Lumpen Radio is a podcast that came about after being inspired from listening to In Dialogue with Marxist-Leninism with Revolutionary Lumpen Radio, with Revolutionary Left Radio. Please edit that out. It was inspired by listening to a podcast with Revolutionary Left Radio and Seriously Wrong in Marx. It was called In Dialogue with Marxist-Leninism. And I think that, as you said, I myself was very much burnt out from local organising, because of those same reasons, where so many different people have got so many different opinions on, the right way to go, and it's hard to organise with someone or an organisation that you feel is truly worthwhile. But there are other people out there in the world who have the same ideals, the same principles, who are driving for the same progress as yourself. So Revolutionary Lumpen Radio I saw as a way to reach out to other people and support with my own mental health in many ways. Just to know that there's people who can empathise and not just, in this situation where it's just me thinking about all of these things, but there are, I'd say, millions of people and like this Marxist-Leninism, and then talking about this historical materialism, this ideology. Millions of people over the world, and they will continuously die for this, and be tortured for this, and wars over territory, ideology, the Cold War. So much of our world is dominated by class war. There's no other way to look about it. This is what it is, people. So, but at the same time, I don't just want to talk about it. We have to make plans to strive towards it. So luckily, Ryan, the Zen Marxist, my co-host, started in the second episode. So the first episode, I talked about the Lumpenproletariat, which is the Lumpen part of the podcast name, because we're representing revolutionary, like the Lumpens out there. We want to show that there's revolutionary potential in the Lumpenproletarians out there. So I've done an episode on that and so-called nationalism. And Ryan actually introduced me to Antonio Gramsci on his YouTube channel after speaking to him on Reddit, and I really loved his perspective on, global warming and capitalism being the driving force to ecological destruction in the world, and how so many people would think to, what did you put it, vote with the dollar, and buy better consumer products. And we were just hitting at the main point was capitalism, war, profit, greed. So, but I ended up watching an Antonio Gramsci video on the cultural hegemony, and that really, again, all of this Marxist ideology, all this Marxist theory, as you read it, this is just other people who've had these same thoughts, and they've analysed the world and then written text about it, and it always relates. So cultural hegemony shows you how the cultures and debate in the superstructure shapes how you think, and why people aren't so militant for their own freedom, because what we're talking about, freedom, and this politics in the world, everything's shaped by politics, and there's people in the world, the ruling class, who shape our freedoms in every aspect of our life. And there's reasons for this, and cultural hegemony talks about Ryan's better at it than me, hence him making the YouTube videos on it. But I'd say it answers the question, why does the working class, the largest class, simply not eat the other classes? Why don't we overthrow them? So people go away and learn that. Antonio Gramsci, cultural hegemony. Come across Ryan's video, the Zen Marxist, and you'll know what I'm saying. But so the people dominate every aspect of our lives, these ruling classes, and how we overthrow it, I think, is through protracted people's war. We have to overthrow them, but these people have got powers. They limit, obviously, our ability. They harbor, they hold nuclear weapons. They hold armies. They do imperialism across the globe. They rape, they pillage, they steal, and they sell for profit. And they're going to cause the extinction to an entire species. And I believe there's revolutionary potential in the Lumpenproletariat, the underclass, the drug dealers, the prostitutes, the sex workers, the flipping homeless people, all of these desperate people who aren't working class. They've never had a steady income. They're not they don't have that working class mentality of going to work and doing the same thing, and they literally can't have a boss breathing down the neck, or unemployable, the so-called crazy. So we just done a series with sex workers, and because all of these people are ostracized from revolutionary organizations, and they're kicked out, they're seen as, literally scum. Like the fear, the scare from, like, how they're called hoodies, they're called thugs, all of these people. And flipping, that's just in the UK. In the US, it's even worse, because of what you call felons, and that's just who you are. But I'm talking about them. These are people spending their lives in jail for being born into an economic class system intentionally to benefit a few ruling class parasites in the world. And they're even, I mean, the haters, they literally think they're a better species than us. Like, there's eugenics going on, like, especially with coronavirus, they're made up because we're all dying, and they're not. Like, but like, they need us for this society to operate, and it's tragic. It breaks me heart when I myself have been told I get ostracized from a revolutionary organisation. I mean, like, there's one locally now, I'm going to name them, the RCG. Like, these people are stressing me out. Like, I mean, I'm never going to fit in, because, like, I mean, all of these politics, that, like, how people are practicing politics, and they're doing, at the same time, it's great work. They're doing, all of these people are doing great work, but I found that I do be doing better work by radicalising the Lumpen, especially in my area. I've been talking about, like, these people know that the lads in my city are onto it. Like, they're not going to be fooled about what communism and socialism is, because I've had rants with them, and we went on for hours, and, like, everybody knows it. I mean, it's like, especially with, like, Cold War coming out on Call of Duty now, and, like, they're seeing the Soviet flag on, like, half side of this, like, soldier's face. But, like, do you know what it is? Because I've been walking around with the revolutionary Lumpen radio fucking hoodie and, like, t-shirt and that on, and, like, I've told them what the hammer and sickle and the star means. It represents, like, the sickles, like the peasant cutting the grass, or the flipping wheat, and the hammers that represents the work, and the star represents, like, the fingers and thumb on a hand, because our hand and shapes our world, and we're being exploited from our labour, but, like, the hand and the human hand is what separates us from another species, especially being able to talk linguistically and get our ideas and thoughts across to other people, because there's no other way to change the world. We have to have these conversations, and like, I'm talking about procrastinated people's world. All of these Marxist words, bourgeoisie, and that are all too hard to like, write and even say some of these. We've got to find better words, I swear, because we're talking about, like, uneducated people, and people who've, like, been neglected from education, the ones who've been kicked out of the class because they just simply couldn't be educated in that manner, or they've got so much stuff going on in the home, and they're always seen arguing, and you're like, all of this, just like, yeah, but, like, again, it's all intentional. It's to make a few people richer. We have to overthrow these people. We have to. And, like, the Lumpen live with violence in their lives. They're doing the same repression and like, violence that the state is doing on them every day of their life, and forcing them into desperate situations, and and like, again, drugs in the communities. The state have put that there, and they want it going on to a certain extent. They've got, like, prison industrial complexes going on. I mean, it's no joke. Like, all of this, what I'm saying, this is how it is, and it's intentional. We have to overthrow them. The Lumpen need to stop doing what the state's doing to them, and taking out on each other, and instead take all that violence, the ones who literally have the means to overthrow the state and the police, and all of these people who were protecting the politicians, who are the ones who keeping the Lumpen and the working class from actually getting rights and freedoms, who are coming down on trade unions and, like, literally limiting our wealth and everything we're producing in our lives to actually be more than what our class is dominated, to be over our, like, what we are meant to be as an individual for a class, in a class structure society of capitalism and this ideology. People, it's primitive. We have, like, it's not even smart what we're talking about. It's just simply, you haven't been told, and it's intentional. And once you've been told, just think about it, educate, like, learn more if there's questions. ask other people, and you'll come to the same conclusion that you have to be involved, and you have to like analyze your situation and see how it's working, and then see what you can do. Maybe it is joining a local revolutionary organization, maybe it is doing podcasting and like doing other things. So we do like theory Thursday episodes, so we go into like Marxist theory and explain these ideas more to people. So for all of these reasons and more, but this is not like, at the same time, we've got to like reach out and share this people, because I mean we've got to listen to, and like social value comes into play. Like, I mean, if you show something to somebody, you want to like become a radical, and like they're looking at it and it's got no likes, it doesn't go nowhere. But if it's got loads of likes, then obviously like, okay, so obviously other people are onto it. This is not like just a load of baloney. This is something worth listening to. And especially these are people who are dominated by pop culture and all that. So like all of these social media platforms, and they've got like, $1-billion industry shoving all kinds of music and all of that on our radios, and then that's what's actually getting all of these artists popular, is because they're forced to listen to it in the cars while they're driving to work for a capitalist under wage slavery. So they ended up buying this, so because they haven't learned to like listen to like the underground music, because they don't know no underground people, and so all of this, and we've got to counter this cultural hegemony. So I mean, we've got a lot on our plate, but I want a revolution. We've got to overthrow the state and then have a dictatorship of the proletariat. I'm so grateful that Ryan could join me from the second episode and help me out through all the other episodes. He's really been an amazing co-host, and I think that we're a great team. But that's pretty much what I've got to say on that. And welcome to any more questions. Do you want to go into you, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So I come at this from like a completely different angle or direction, I guess. So all the way back in high school, like I was the sort of argumentative logic nerd that I would just fight with everyone over anything. Even myself, if you put me in an empty room, I'd be fighting with myself within 10 minutes over what I believe and why, right? So, but because I went to a religious school, right, religion was the target, right? So I would go after all of them all the time on every issue. I took philosophy, I took critical thinking. I became sort of renowned for being that annoying dude that would argue with, so much so that whenever anyone in school would have any discussion about religion, right, people would come looking for me because they knew I would always be interested, and I always definitely was. But even within that, there was always sort of one religion, quote unquote, that I would treat differently, right? And that was essentially Buddhism, right? So none of the supernatural aspects of it, right? I don't believe in like the reincarnation or anything like that. But the core of it that like is like the Taoism, if that makes sense, sort of like the balance, whatever you want to call it, right? And it's experiential and it's also demonstrable. So if I sort of took that core, and that's where Zen comes from in my name, because I still hold that today. I'm still a Zen Buddhist, right? But just without any of the sort of supernatural elements. But that idea of like balance in all things and everything was incredibly, what's the word? Like it came to me easily. Like it was intuitive, right? That just made sense to me. So, but at the same time, it was all, politics on my mind as well, and where I fall on this and what makes sense to me there. So when, obviously, if you go to a religious school, for some reason, people, it comes down to like, religious people always want to argue against science, right? Science doesn't make sense. And it never made any sense to me, right? Because even if 100% of everything we know as science was wrong, that doesn't get you a millimeter closer to believing that your God's real, right? But for some reason, people want to hate on science. So I understood that science is the best way that we have for understanding things, right? If you want to understand the material world, science is the best thing we have for that, right? The scientific method. So what I wanted was something like that to understand the world on a much larger scale, or the political scale, right? And that idea, combined with the sort of, Taoism of Zen, essentially was what led me to dialectics, right? Which is sort of the key philosophy within Marxism, right? So reading up on that, it makes perfect sense to me when you talk about dialectics, and how Marxists talk about, the progression of history, and how, class struggle is the sort of engine of history. That's what drives history forward. And it's ever changing, it's ever adapting. Again, it's the same thing that's found in Zen Buddhism, right? The idea that like the only thing that's constant is change, right? And Zen Buddhism and Marxism understand this perfectly, right? There's no such thing as constant. The only constant is change. Everything's changing, everything's adapting, everything's developing. You can go down to like all the way from cells to, solar systems, right? Everything's in perpetual motion. So your politics also should adopt that and should adapt that, right? This is why we think of, scientific socialism, because it's not. Some people think of science as like a set of facts that you just have to memorize and they're true because someone says so, right? I mean, that's kind of like applying a religious mindset to how science works. And that isn't how science works at all, right? Science is a method that anyone can apply, and it's experiential, and it's also demonstrable. And you should have politics that reflects that. Everyone should have to be able to, everyone should be able to justify what they believe and why they believe it at any given time. And at the same time, when I was, looking at capitalism with the idea that, the only thing that's constant is change, understanding that, okay, well, no system has existed forever, nothing can exist forever, no system can exist forever, which means that the only thing you're left with at that point is change. So this system will ultimately disintegrate, and then you look at then you get into sort of the nitty-gritty of the actual injustices of the system and what the system is and what takes place under it and how it functions and what it excludes and how and why, and then you par that with Marxism and how this works and how it's the best critique of capitalism that we currently have. It's the best understanding of capitalism we currently have, right? I mean, even hardcore capitalists can read Marx's understanding or critique of capital and understand that he understands this very well. Sure, they won't agree with the prescriptive elements, but the descriptive elements they will agree with entirely, right? He clearly understands how this works and why it works. So yeah, it was basically just, I have an understanding that everything has to change. I have an understanding that the system is, ultimately unjust at its very core. I also had this idea that I must be able to know what I believe and why, and be able to defend that at any given time to anyone. And the only thing that leads that is Marxism ultimately, because it's actually a philosophical framework. It's not just a set of beliefs that you have to sort of adopt religiously, which is ultimately what I think liberalism is, right? Because this system of liberalism isn't an entire philosophical framework that's actually demonstrable, and it doesn't actually make sense. It doesn't engage with the real world, right? All of the slogans and all the things that they throw out, sure, can make sense. But when you look at the larger picture, this system isn't going to work ultimately, right? It isn't going to last forever. And it's that's why I go with scientific socialism, right? It's always changing, it's always adapting, it's always developing, and that's where I come from it, I guess, which is slightly different than other people, because some people, they just look at the injustice in the world and they say, okay, there has to be an answer for this, which I get, right? That's completely fine and totally justifiable. That makes sense to me entirely. I guess, but I just understand that, the way that I came to this was fundamentally different than others, in that it was a sort of philosophical, position of like, I need to be able to justify what I believe and why. And under capitalism, I couldn't do that system. I couldn't do that, right? I can't have a justification for why we must let X, number of people starve, other than just callousness. It's just like, oh, they chose it. And it's like, well, no, they didn't. So there's no real grounding to this, philosophy, as they call it. So I just had to discard that and look for something that actually, understood politics where power comes from the ground up, right?
And how did the podcast start, and how does it kind of fit with your political goals?
Oh, yeah, sure. So as I started making YouTube videos when I was in college or university, right? And at the same time, I start, looking for Discord channels to join and subreddits to join and those kind of things. And that's what Shippy was talking about when he met me on a subreddit, right? Because I'm pretty sure I was like posting memes to some subreddit. It was about, anti-consumption. There's this subreddit called anti-consumption, right? And the whole basis of the subreddit is that, we can save the world if you just don't buy as much stuff. And that idea fundamentally annoys me, because it's fundamentally just false, right? There's no amount of the lack of consumption, A, that will save the planet, and B, it puts the burden of proof on the wrong people, right? It shouldn't be up to the whole masses of people to not consume in order to stop the destruction of the planet, when we know that like 71% of the pollution comes from top 100 companies, right? So you actually need government policy to enforce that. You can't just individually ask billions of people to change and uproot their entire lives to stop their spending habits. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he like DM'd me from that, and I told him to join a Discord that I was in, and yeah, we pretty much just went from there, honestly.
And how long have you been doing this show?
I actually don't know.
I think it's coming up to like 10 months, maybe. I think we're actually coming up to like a year nearly. We've done maybe 24 episodes, maybe another like 4 or 5 bonus episodes. We've got a lot more coming up, and I'm planning on just doing it for the rest of my life, because I've met a lot of good comrades out there and really interesting people, and develop good relationships with a lot of people, and I'm hoping to maintain that. It's amazing to see the work that other people are doing. Like, I'd love to, maybe see you 40, 50 years, see what you're producing, see where you're at. Hopefully you're in a great place. Hopefully there's a revolution, and maybe we might not need to do podcasts because we can do other things and enjoy our life. But for now, I am grateful to have been doing it for this long and had the guests on that we have had on, and gained so much information, learn from them so much, hopefully, and to better myself. And I just want to throw in there, because that ties into what Ryan said about scientific socialism as a tool to understand the world and politics and social interactions, and him wanting to have something to follow that he's showing what was right and truthful, and this consumption and anti-consumption so ready, where people believe that they can simply change the spending habits and do a lot of the world, and religion was mentioned. But all of these things are clear evidence that people want to understand the world, people want to know the truth. And this is what it is. We need to understand the truth and what is, we need to understand what's true in the world so that we can make the correct decisions in our lives to have the right impact. And we don't want to be fooled into making foolish decisions that are bad, because we only live once. And there's so much misinformation out there. This is why people are on conspiracy theories, but all of this is people needing answers, because everything that's fed to them doesn't make sense. They're hungry for the truth. People want to know what's going on. So yeah, that's why I think that we're both scientific socialists.
Yeah, it basically just comes down to wanting to know what's true, right? That's why I do this, because if I'm wrong about something, I want to know that I'm wrong about something. But the fact that I believe this means, what's the saying? Like, a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence, right? I think that's like David Hume or something, right? So if I genuinely believe this, then I have good reasons to believe this. And if I'm wrong about anything, I want to know what I'm wrong about and why, right? But I am sufficiently convinced that this is correct that I will happily, discuss any topic with anyone at any time, because and I get. I get mad at some Marxists because of that, right? They treat Marx like in the same way Christians treat a god, right? They just believe everything he says, no matter what, and it just becomes this sort of like great man theory. Marx says it, therefore it has to be true. And I don't think that's Marxism, right? Like, if Marx was alive today, he wouldn't just point to his old books and say, that's the gospel, go for it, right? Like, that's not how this works. I mean, the material conditions have changed. We don't live in the 1800s anymore. We're fundamentally dealing with a different society under different conditions. So, okay, sure, some of what Marx and Engels wrote might very well be applicable today. Great, take it and discard what is not applicable anymore. Get rid of what doesn't work, get rid of what isn't applicable. I think that's the only way to move forward. I mean, if you have an understanding that change is the only constant, why would you cling to these texts like they're some kind of unchanging truth? That's not how this works.
Yeah, and just because you got me fired up because you said what makes you mad, what makes me mad is that we're trying to find the truth, and there's politicians out there who are spreading lies that are causing things like the Iraq War, millions of people dying and to this day suffering insanely mind-blowing life experiences in like torturous conditions, and we think we've got it hard. These have got it like these are the worst liars in the world, and it makes me angry. So I mean, they do this to us so they can profit and exploit, and it's disgusting. People, it's
Well, they're ideological actors, right? Like, there's no way that anyone in governments around the world today, sits down at the end of a day and thinks like, "Oh, I have to just get to like the truth, and why do I?" They don't do that, right? They're ideological actors. They know what got them in the system. They know what they have to do to remain in the system. They're benefiting from the system, right? These aren't like neutral people that are just wandering around looking for what's true in the world, right? They're ideological actors that are a product of and simultaneously upholding a system for their own class benefit, right? They're not neutral actors.
That's what we call opportunists or reactionaries.
Well, no, they're just bourgeoisie, right? I mean, opportunists and reactionaries are different sects of Marxists that, opportunists essentially are people who say they're Marxists because they see an opportunity in Marxism becoming popular, and they're sort of bandwagoning. They're sort of hopping on the bandwagon of Marxism as it passes by because it's popular or it gets clicks or whatever. But no, I mean, the bourgeoisie aren't like that, right? They are ideological, and they're upholding their own class interests. They know who they are. They know what they're doing. And this is why I always talk about like, the bourgeoisie are the best Marxists on the planet, right? Because every single one of them understands class consciousness, and they understand class solidarity, right? Every one of them understands what power is and how they use it to maintain their own class position, and what they need to do to prevent their class position from being uprooted, right? They really are the best Marxists on the planet because all of them internationally have class solidarity, right? This is why you see, that's what essentially... what is that class you can take in college, which is all about like international relations, right? That's what that is, right? It's all about the international bourgeoisie all getting together, agreeing to, screw the working people of their country or other countries, right? And they all have a sort of shared understanding that we need to do this in order to maintain our class position. So that's just what it is. That's how they operate, and that's how they stay where they are.
So from the outside, this kind of Marxist-Leninist philosophy is oftentimes very intimidating. There's a lot of terms, like I think you were saying, that can be kind of confusing. What do you recommend for people when they want to kind of explore? Where should they start?
It can be really intimidating for sure, and it's also one of those things that, like, if you want to start with Marxism, you almost shouldn't start with Marx in a weird way, in my opinion. There are some sort of basic texts that you can read, like State and Revolution by Lenin's a great one. But all the terminology for sure gets really confusing. But I guess it depends on how you want to approach the problem, or how you come to the question, I suppose. I mean, like I said earlier, right, for me it was different because it was like dialectics and a sort of philosophical understanding. So I came at it from the idea that everything's changing. What politics reflects that, right? And it isn't capitalism, right? I mean, capitalism essentially deifies capital and believes that, like, the end of history, this is all that there is, this is all there can be. And that's completely... not only ahistorical, but it's just not demonstrable in any way, shape, or form, right? So you can start with, like, there are even good podcasts out there, right? Like, I think Red Left Radio did really recently did like an introduction to Marxism podcast. That one's great. State and Revolution is good if you want to sort of understand how the state functions, what it is and what it isn't, right? That's the one that Lenin talks about, the state actually being an instrument of class warfare. But I totally agree with you. It is for sure intimidating on the outside looking in, and it doesn't get any less intimidating when you sort of think you understand Marxism, so to speak, because then you get, there's so many sects within it and people within sects it just becomes a nightmare. That's why ultimately I go with pragmatism. So I always look for like what worked. So the reason that people adopted Marx and Leninism wasn't because, Marx and Lenin said so, right? It was because at the end of World War I, there was only one country on the planet that successfully waged a proletarian revolution, right? And that was the October Revolution, Lenin, right? So at that point, you have whatever he did worked. So that's why, again, this is the scientific aspect, right? Like, it was experimental. He did it and it worked. We have results. That's why we adopt that and look at what he did and take everything that he wrote, because it worked, right? We should go with results. We should go with pragmatism. We should go with actually getting the results. And the same thing for, again, you go through history, you find Mao, again, worked, successful proletarian revolution, right? He did it. So you can take his writings, read what makes sense, adopt it, what doesn't make sense, what isn't applicable to the times, what is, what was just a product of his time, either culturally or whatever. You can throw that out, right? It doesn't matter, not important. It's all about taking into this time now, what's needed for this time now, and getting rid of everything else. But I agree with you. Like, Marxism as a field is it can be confusing for sure.
I would say for people to learn, listen to Red Menace podcast.
That's great.
Brett and Alison go through Marxist theory, and State and Revolution is an excellent one. There's loads of others out there. They're so easy to listen to, and yet they break down text in an amazing way and analyze it, give you the core elements of the text. If reading's too heavy, you don't have the time, you can listen to podcasts whilst you're working. But again, so much of this is philosophical, like so much of it is like a philosophy. So you can be reading texts and we're trying to learn from these other Marxist writers who've done the revolution, and we're trying to see how it would work today because the material conditions have changed. Excuse me. So we have to kind of do the science ourselves, see what does work, see what doesn't work, and sometimes the text that you read might not make any sense to you whatsoever because it just doesn't apply to your situation. So that's still a good thing because you can see this doesn't work for me. Maybe I do need to, again, see what does work for me. And then that's how people end up writing other texts. And then that could then resonate with so many people in your area if you're in a certain, neighborhood. And, there's so many neighborhood people in those neighborhoods who know what you're going through. And, this kind of local work is important because we all know what people are talking about, whether it's local politics or whatnot. Everybody wants to get the truth. So, yeah, it's up to us. We can't just rely on other people's work and the Marxist text. It's good to see what they've written because, again, it's genuinely amazing. People go to the cinemas to watch movies about drama or love wars. But this is actual history that we're doing, and it's some of the most incredible history and human, documented self-sacrifice for a better cause for all of humanity, and it really happened. But obviously, we're not told about it because we might get inspired ourselves to see that these could work. So yeah. It's extremely daunting. Sometimes it can be so challenging. You might just start reading and get tired. But please, people, you have to do it for yourself. You'll get so much out of it. And again, hopefully, like myself, you might realize that maybe other people might be inspired by what you're saying, and maybe you'll have your own podcast. And I've gotten so much support. I want to thank everybody for the support. What would you like? I didn't know. Again, you don't know until you try, and other people have tried, and you can try. But if you're not willing to actually do a podcast, again, sharing it goes a long way, and even just leaving feedback and support because we're trying to make a better world for everybody. No joke.
Yeah, do you have any other thoughts on kind of this proliferation of left-wing media, through podcasts and YouTube and, just so many other ways? It seems like the discourse is so much more robust than I remember when I was much younger.
Yeah. So what you should do is watch what you can, listen to what you can. You don't have to follow everybody, but it's important to see the discourse and listen to the discourse. But again, try and be scientific. Try and be a scientific socialist in your analysis. Don't just follow everybody and some people might say good things, some people might say bad things, but the truth remains. So try to look out for revisionism, people the actual opportunism, as you do see, like BreadTube gets criticised for a lot of parts, but for the most part, as you said, this is like the discourse has changed from what you can remember, and it's going to continue to change. Everything will change, but what we know for sure is nobody's ever seen left-wing podcast, BreadTube, or other great content that leftists are putting out there. And we don't know the effect that it's going to have on the world or class consciousness in 10 years, 20 years. So don't be overly critical for what some people are doing. And support the ones who are doing what they are doing. But we don't know where it's going to go. Some people, again, are going to be doing this for 50 years. Hopefully, we have no idea the heights that our comrades are going to go, or the impact, that this is going to have on the world in general. But it's up to us. It's up to us getting the message across, because the capitalists and the bourgeoisie have got their media platforms. They own the internet, and they can have advertisements shoved in their face at like every minute of every day. When we need to push back and produce what we can, add your prop. Some people do as little as like memes, but we can always criticize, but we have no idea whether anything could just influence that one comrade out there who's going to dedicate his life to the struggle and affect so much more. It's up to us, people.
It's also supposed to be difficult, right? Like, I mean, Marx talks about Marxism being the ruthless criticism of all that exists, right? So if you're finding it hard, then good, you're probably doing it correctly, because it's supposed to be hard, right? If you're just finding it easy, you're breezing through it, and you're like, whoa, this is mega easy, I'm on top of the world, I know everything now, right? Like, you're doing it wrong. That's not how this is supposed to go. Oh wow, I completely managed to forget what I was going to say. That's amazing.
That's a first.
Yeah, I was kind of asking about, if you had any thoughts on this kind of proliferation of left-wing media. We don't have the same kind of controls that we used to on what we're allowed to talk about. This show and your show, probably, or at least in the U.S., would not really be allowed on the radio.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I throw in with something? Sorry.
Sure, go for
it. When it comes to limiting our freedom of speech, which I think was what you was getting at. Again, we have no idea how far this is going to go. Antonio Gramsci was thrown into jail by Mussolini for spreading the word of communism and being so influential. Am I going to be in jail one day for what I say on Revolutionary Lumpen Radio? We just don't know. It's never happened before, so I don't know what I can get away with. Everything I say, by the way, people, is just all art. I'm actually an opportunist, by the way, but really though, I'll say what it takes to inspire revolution, because we need a revolution. So maybe I'll go into jail, but I'll only try and organise in jail, and I will try and be the Antonio Gramsci of our generation. But they're going to have to kill me. It's as simple as that. They've done it throughout all of history. Are they going to do it to one of us? I don't know, but it doesn't matter, because you can't kill the idea of the revolution. It's just as simple as that. We have to...
The landscape.
We have to just... countercultural hegemony wherever we can, and we can't hold back. We can't hold back people, because then we are opportunists, because they're only letting us say what they are allowed to say. Then it's only going to benefit them. Do what you think is right, people. Sometimes it is a tactical retreat, a revolutionary retreat, so you can attack forwards with a bigger platform in the future, or just building a platform before you actually start saying real revolutionary shit that's going to inspire people. But we have to do what we've got to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the sort of, the media landscape, Marx had this idea that capitalism will build its own gravediggers, and because capital has this need to, permanently find new markets to exploit, or perpetually look for greater exploitation of current markets, right? They've given us technology, the internet, all of these things, computers, and ultimately it's gotten out of hand for them to start with, right? For the first sort of 10, 15 years of the internet, they didn't really have control over it, right? So voices got out there that wouldn't have been able to get out there. Now it's kind of changing. If you understand that, the bourgeoisie, just think of them as like the elite or the rich or whatever. It's not a perfect translation, but whatever. If they control society, therefore they control everything that takes place in society, right? They control the media, they control all institutions. And because of this, in a traditional media landscape, yes, you wouldn't have had revolutionaries on TV because, well, duh, right? So, but now it's starting to change. They didn't have control over technology for, like I said, those 10, 15 years, really. But now it's definitely changing, right? They're understanding what's happening on a global scale. That's why you're seeing an ever more entwining connection between like government, NSA, CIA, etc., with things like Facebook and Google and Microsoft. Right, they're understanding that if they want to maintain their control and their power of the government, they can't allow this sort of Goliath of the internet to go unchecked. So now they're implementing controls and they're, shutting things down and they're sort of, seizing a greater control over it. But it comes down to, is it enough or can they do it enough? I mean, I'm sure that, many people are aware of like the Snowden leaks, etc., and, the surveillance controls they have going on and PRISM and Operation Keyscore and all those kinds of things, right? So you understand that, the sort of international surveillance state is there. And again, it just shows that, everything in society has a class component, right? Technology is not class neutral. So long as it's controlled by the bourgeoisie in places like Silicon Valley, it will be used to achieve their ends, which is ultimately going to be surveillance or selling us stuff, right? Tracking, ads, cookies, it's going to follow you around. And, there's no such thing as a neutral arbiter in society. So long as the bourgeoisie controls society, every institution within society will be further or will exist to further bourgeois control. And like I said, you're now seeing that in the technology sector with the fusion of Silicon Valley with the sort of surveillance state, and they're now cracking down on it.
And if people want to learn more about both of you and your show, where should they go?
Yeah, please check us out on patreon.com/lumpenpodcast. We do have exclusive episodes on there, you get a message from us thanking you very much because you've helped change the world and what I'm talking about, even $1 a month. We're talking about revolutionary people. But yeah, Twitter, we post pretty good content on Twitter. Give us some feedback, but you've earned yourself an easy retweet. And again, we're changing the world. The people support goes a long way.
I'm also sorry, I thought you were finished.
But we're on pretty much all podcast platforms. Lumpen.libsyn.com is our website. Ryan?
Yeah, for sure, right? I'm just a Zen Marxist on everything. And like I said, because I always want what I believe to be challenged and everything. Like if you hit me up on Twitter, I'll always respond. You can DM me on anything. I'll always respond, right? Even here on Discord, if you hit me up on it with any question or anything, I'll always respond. Because, I really do believe that I should have to be able to, justify everything I believe in any way, right? So I'll definitely answer any questions or point you to any material or anything if you hit me up.
And I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming to the show today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm deeply humbled that you could have us on. I'm going to continue to follow your work, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Love and solidarity.
You've been listening to The Jason Rigdon Show. More information and links for our guests are in the show notes. For more information about this show, visit jasonrigdon.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, email jasonrigdon@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 425-835-2766. Our theme music is Bush Week by Nihilor and used under the Creative Commons Attribution License. This episode is copyrighted by Jason Rigdon in 2020 and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. Thanks for listening and have a great day.